Today in the studio, we're going to be making a silicone mold of my awesome little gopher frog. Now, I actually sculpted this at the beginning of last year out of monster clay medium, and it turned out absolutely spectacular. Now, I have created an overall playlist for you to watch all of the content that I have around this piece of artwork, and I actually recently made a latex mold of this. Now, the latex mold is absolutely great, and I've already casted a few pieces of concrete sculptures out of that mold, so it's holding up pretty well. But today I want to make sure that I capture it as well in a silicone form, maybe a heavier silicone, so that way I can do some heavier plastics and more epoxy-like of pours. And latex just really can't hold up when you're putting a lot of plastic and a lot of wear and tear on the actual mold that you're working with. Silicone will have a little bit more longevity, and also silicone will allow me to cast another master mold or master cast for more latex molds in the future if I ever do want to. It also allows me to easily store it away in like a bin or a bag in the corner or in a Tupperware bin, and then I can make sure I keep the sculpted designs for future uses later on down the road. I put a lot of work in my sculptures, and I want to be able to capture them for future projects or sales or creations, anything I want. So we're going to be using Smooth On Moldstar 15 Slow to create this awesome little mold here. Let's go ahead and get into this project, guys. All right, let's jump into the silicone mold making process here with a few items on our station here. We have the original latex mold of that master cast that I created for concrete work and things like that. We also have some smaller molds here. I've got like a 3 set of pumpkins, and if I have any excess, I'll pour that silicone that I've left over into there and fill it up. Always have some spares laying nearby. I also repaired the back leg of our frog here. I had 2 master casts here, and I actually am just picking the best one that I like the most. We are going to be using the hot glue method to attach our our casted item here to the Tupperware bottom base. I'm actually experimenting with using some tin plates as well to make my molds, and then just putting those molds in plastic gallon baggies. Kind of store them away. If you want to use Tupperware containers, I do recommend it because then you can put a nice lid on it, and it does protect your silicone molds from dust and debris. It also makes it very easy to stack those. We'll let that glue set up there, and then we'll go ahead and start mixing up some silicone. We're going to be using Moldstar 15 Slow for this project, and I go through around maybe 2.5 total sample size bottles here. I really don't like ordering the sample size bottles, but I'll be honest, I've been doing so many latex molds here recently just because it's such a cheaper option as opposed to ordering a lot of silicone for the projects. I've been doing a lot more casting here in the studio, so I've been doing a lot of sculpting and a lot of casts of those sculpted items, and using latex is just such a cheaper option. It just really is. Even when you compensate for just the price of the latex, as well as the price of any kind of gypsum or fiberglass you put over those as a jacket for support, it's still cheaper than silicone. It's hard to say. But I do like Moldstar 15 Slow for a lot of these projects. It is really a great brand here. When I do order my sample sizes, I do order them off of Amazon, and you can find those in the affiliate list below. Here we are. So we have our A and our B here. And we're going to go ahead and pour these in some disposable cups. I really like disposable cups, and I really do like just working in small batches here. So usually I'll just use 1 cup for A, 1 cup
Now
for B.
again, I like the disposable cups because you're able to pour 1 part by 1 part into their individual cups, and then you pour them both into your mixing cup. And because it is a slow kicking silicone, it really does increase the longevity of the work time. You can use the same cup instead of disposing a lot of them. You can use the same cup over and over and over again. And if you wait for it to cure up, you can also even remove that silicone from that plastic cup and then use the plastic cup again if you'd like to. Just make sure there's no residue in there in case you want to do like something like paint or anything in there. You don't want that silicone mixing with your...
We're going to go ahead and give this a nice stir up here. Make sure you stir it so that there's no white or light blue streaks. You want a nice light blue color throughout your entire cup here. Now, if you do get any spots that are just not mixed very well, you can also mix it in the container as you kind of pour it just to get a little bit of mixing action there. But just try not to apply too many like bubbles to it. If you can avoid that, I'd recommend it. Although it's not imperative that you have like bubble-less silicone molds, why not make them as stout as possible? Now, usually I'll do a dry, kind of like a brush on method here, just making sure that the silicone gets into all of the nooks and crannies of the existing sculpture, or in this situation, the casted plastic piece that we are working with here. I'm going to readjust you there and just pour out the rest of this layer here. And we're going to go ahead and use just a small brush here, as well as the popsicle stick, to make sure it gets into all of the nooks and crannies here. We've sculpted so many details into the actual frog itself, or any sculpture in general. You don't want to lose all of those details just because you had some air between the item and the silicone. So make sure you brush it on, make sure you push out any of those air pockets and bubbles that are making contact with the surface of the item here. You can also wait for this to completely dry out if you want to and cure up. Now there's a lot of different ways that you can make your silicone mold. Now if this kind of like divot around the base of the kind of like the burrow, where the burrowing frog would be like in the ground or in the mud, kicked up in there, if this was more of a hangover, you would want it to be a two-part mold in some way, so that way you can kind of split it apart and pull this out easier. Because it's such a small divot here, and there is a wide gap between the two, I was really not concerned with that in this situation. If it were to be a large hangover, or if I had sculpted textures on the bottom, I would have to do a two-part mold where I pulled it apart. But because we're going to have a flat bottom, it makes it very simplistic just to do a single pour. All right, so we're going to pour our second batch into our little disposable cup here and go and mix this up for the next pour. Now this is the same overall kit, we're just pouring another round. And that's why I make a individual cup specifically for the A and the B. That way you can just continuously using the same cups over and over again. And because we were using MoldStar 15 slow, it also means that the mixing cup, it doesn't kick. So you have a lot of time to pour as many layers as you need to as you're working through this process here. Now again, I don't have enough to completely fill this out here. I'm just using the sample size kits that I had ordered off of Amazon, and we'll go ahead and get it filled up as far as we can before we need to move on to another stage in time where we'll work on a third layer there. Anyways, there's quite a few mixes here. So there's the second layer, here's another third layer, making sure to get all those white streaks out, and then we can do another pour there. Some people like to pour it from really up high to get as many of those little bubbles out as possible. I'm not really into all that, really. I just kind of just pour it as I see fit. And then because I do the dry brush method on the first layer, we don't have to worry about all of those bubbles and things making contact with the subject. And then a lot of times when you try to like get as many bubbles out as possible, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to minimize the bubbles that are in contact with the actual item itself that they're making the mold of. Alright, so mixing another layer here. Look how goopy and beautiful that is. Oh, it looks so good. So silky smooth. I really do like smooth on materials here, whether it's the plastics or it's the actual silicone itself. I really do like their brand, and I'm not saying I wouldn't change brands if I was offered a sponsor deal or something like that, but I'm not affiliated with Smooth On in any way, so but I do enjoy repping their brand while I am using their items here. Now, one thing that you'll see me do ever so often is when I find that I don't need an actual silicone mold anymore, I'll go ahead and destroy it. So maybe it's like maybe a one-time pour, or maybe I had a pour that just where the item just doesn't sell very good, and I'm just like, well, there's no point in me keeping just molds just laying around when the item just absolutely never sells. It's just wasted space and material. So I went ahead and cut up some existing silicone, some molds here, and we're just going to fill in some material. Now, because we've already got a nice layer of silicone between the actual subject of the frog and the actual silicone, we don't have to worry about any of these pieces, these solidified pieces that are already cured, making contact with the frog itself. If you were to put these in before you poured it, it could very likely be that one of these would make contact with the exterior of the frog or trap some air between the frog and the silicone, and you don't want that. So make sure you're pushing it into uncured silicone, so that way it can kind of go over and around all of those small pieces that you're adding to the volume there. And that's all you're doing. All you're doing is adding to the volume there, so that way you don't use as much material as you're pouring. But of course, it's small amounts, but it does add up a little bit. Mixing up another batch here, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to fill in the pumpkins here. Sorry, I forgot what magnets they were for a minute. These are the trio pumpkin magnets that I offer on my Etsy shop. They are my original sculpted design, and of course they are now casted. And then I do insert magnets in those before absolute detailing them with paint to perfection, you guys. I perfectly paint those in a variety of different colors. And then we're just going to pour the rest of that little cup right there of the second batch here onto the frog here. So as of right now, we've used a total of 2 sample sizes of the silicone smooth on Moldstar 15 slow, and as you can see, it takes a lot of volume to fill up these containers, guys. It's a lot of material, but and that's what makes it so costly. But it is so stout. These silicone molds turn out absolutely stout, absolutely performing great, and you can produce a lot of casts out of them before they start to wear out there. So here we are going to make sure we scrape out as much of that container as we can. We don't want to waste any if we can get away with it, or at least not very much, you know. And then we're just going to let this cure up here. Now I'm going to order another batch of silicone, but you do not have to wait for that. You're going to get to roll straight into it in this content video here, you guys. But we are going to go ahead and finish up with this batch here, and then I'll set it off to the side here. As you can see, we did not cover up the frog entirely, and we need to make sure that the frog is covered up by at least 1 or 2 centimeters of material, so that way we have a nice strong bottom to the actual silicone mold. Because remember, we used the hot glue gun from below, so this would be the bottom of the mold when it's turned over. Alright, so a separate day, separate session here, and I actually ordered a few bottles of this, and man was I ever disappointed in Amazon, whether it's shipped from the warehouse or shipped from a local dealer or a reseller. I ordered 2 containers of this, and they're ordered on separate days, and I'm super disappointed in whoever did this because both containers were busted open. Super horrible experience with this. I've never had this happen to me before, and I do want to share sometimes of the negatives and the bad things that happen to me along the way. It's not all Humpty Dumpty, happy-go-lucky when we're on our art journey. Sometimes we run into hiccups, and this is one of them. So they were nice enough to send me another batch, and they were like, "Well, do you want to send this one back?" And I'm like, "No, the lid's completely broken and chipped, and the lid, the seal is broken. Like, what am I gonna do? Put them in just a gallon bag and just send them back? Maybe there'll be like silicone all over the postal guy's truck. Lord save that guy if that gets silicone everywhere." And I'm like, no, so I'll just go ahead and use what you sent me. But at the same time, it's not full bottles, so they sent me another one. And then the second batch is also busted. What in the world? And my wife is like, "Well, do you want to go ahead and send it back again?" I'm like, "Well, no, because then Amazon's gonna think I'm like being some kind of like cheeky cheeker, and I'm gonna be like, you know, requesting bottles just all willy nilly." And I said, I don't want them to think that I'm just like taking advantage of the system because they'll send another one. But in all reality, both bottles, both separate times, were completely busted open. There's silicone all inside the shipping bag and the boxes, and it's just absolutely nasty. So there's like no like just letting it sit around in the studio for like 3 or 4 months until I'm ready to use it. I need to use it up because the seals are broken and the lids are busted. Okay, my tangent is over. Very disappointed in Amazon, reseller, whoever it was that sent me these packages of these bottles. Now, I could order a big gallon size, and I'll probably do that again in the near future, but I haven't been making many silicone molds as I used to, so a little sample size here and there, it just meets the needs that I have, you know? And a lot of times I'm also casting a lot of my magnet sets. I'm still working to make a lot of those. So I'm working with smaller size silicone molds. So these little sample sizes really do meet the needs that I have currently. Now I am ordering a lot of latex, guys. So the latex on my channel is really starting to grow out a lot more because I'm working in heavier, larger size of sculptures, whether concrete or large plastic. And you know, sometimes when you're making sculptures in realistic size, you know, a peregrine falcon or an eagle is a pretty big bird. So making a 2-foot tall silicone mold could be, you know, $200 or $300, whereas a latex jacket mold could only cost me like 50 or 60. So it's a big price difference when you're talking about the overall end result being the same. It just takes a little bit more work to get the latex to do what you want it to do. All right, so with everything cured up here, guys, we've got that last pour done, and it's cured up overnight. We're going to go ahead and drill a small air pilot hole in the very bottom of this container here, and then I'm just going to use some sculpting tools to break the seal around the outside edges of the Tupperware container here. I don't know if I'm going to keep this in the Tupperware container because this was actually a pretty big mold for the Tupperware container to want to release. But it did come out okay with a little bit of elbow grease. Same thing for the actual frog itself. So we're going to go ahead and remove this from our silicone mold here. And as we go around, we'll also peel up that hot glue there. So that came off as well. And we're going to pull this out. Now, I'm surprised. Just remember that I did spray this with like a silicone mold release. So it actually pulls up pretty easy overall. If you didn't, then, you know, sometimes these molds, because it does have an undercut on the back heel, or kind of like the dirt heel that's sculpted on the base with the frog, it does have a little bit of an undercut, and it's a tight fit between the rock or the dirt foundation and the actual frog itself. It's very small, like window there. It can make it difficult to pull out here, but with a little bit of elbow grease from both directions, it does pull out substantially easy. So I'm very impressed by how easy it was to come out, and I can already tell that this silicone mold is a beast, and it is really well put together. So I'm very impressed with this. Looking forward to making more of these to sell in the near future, fully painted, of course. So I'm very happy with how this has turned out so far. Pulling out a little bit of that. You can also use soap and water to wash these out if you'd like to, between like casting sessions, but the first cast later will pull out any kind of like debris or substrates or anything like that. And there we go, guys. Now this is the mold itself. It took around 2.5, maybe 2 1/4 of the sample size kits to fill this up here. And again, it was just a time variant between the second kit and the third kit, just because I didn't have a need for it right away. But of course, here's the mold that we have. It turned out absolutely great. It's got a little bit of weight to it, and we got that bottom thickened out so where it doesn't create a lot of suction. So when you pull this out, it doesn't pull on the bottom inward as you know the item is removed. I was able to capture a lot of the details in this overall mold, and we'll be doing maybe some 2-part epoxy pours with that in the near future. I would really like to make it a jade frog. I'm just really drawn to that, and I think it would be a real good showcase of the actual frog in just a different form other than just heavy detail work. Now again, guys, remember that you can check out this in its entire own playlist. Everything from the monster clay sculpting to the latex mold to the silicone mold, which is this video. And here in the near future, we're going to also be making this into a detailed diorama with flocking and grass textures and mud. And I'm going to paint the frog into a cool, like maybe design that mirrors the Gopher frog. You're also going to see another one of these in the near future when I am working on the peregrine falcon. I did sculpt in a small divot where a pool of water is going to be underneath the stump, and my customer who's commissioned that piece has already requested a particular type of frog that's similar to this one. Not a Gopher frog, but very similar to it. So we'll be visiting that again in the future, and I'll probably include that frog in this playlist as well. So check out some of the other videos. Make sure you like and subscribe, guys, because I'm making all sorts of art all the time here, whether it's a sculpture, a painting, or something in between. We're always trying new stuff and having fun with the creations that we have. Always remember that I also sell on Etsy, and if you would like custom artwork to be featured here on YouTube, then make sure you reach out to me. Of course, most of the videos that I create here are sold items that I'm just creating as a double kind of like content for you guys to enjoy. I hope you do enjoy my YouTube channel, so make sure you like and subscribe. It supports me. I'll catch you guys on the next awesome video later. I dropped it.